Economics takes your observed behavior as optimal and tries to rationalize why it's optimal, assuming that you make choices that represent some underlying preferences. Mathematical models are used to provide a more analytical framework for understanding these phenomena. We don't actually believe that people sit and do complicated calculations every time they make a decision, but we want to act as though they're doing that, so that we may analyze their choices systematically and objectively. Take the example of a mathematical biologist, who acts similarly when analyzing animal behavior. Animals are treated as fitness maximizers who are taking an action to maximize their fitness or reproductive success. No one believes that animals actively sit there and calculate their fitness. However, we do believe that they behave as though they did this. Why should human beings be any different in this regard? They may not be aware of their preferences, and that these preferences help them compute the utility of different choices, but we can act as if they do, and get lots of useful insights from this framework of classical economics. For instance, if we see someone's choices A and B, and we know their underlying preferences, we can then act as though they're maximizing their happiness or utility, and make useful predictions about what they would do if we change the set of alternatives that they are facing. A group of economists emerged in the 1990s who challenged this view, the behavioural economists. They believe that people make mistakes in many domains and are unable to see their own limitations. Much like optical illusions, even if I tell you that you're looking at an optical illusion, it would be like you not being able to see past the illusion. They believe that people are unable to compute the utility of each of the choices that they face. Richard Thaler, one of behavioural economics' founders, describes it as economics done with strong injections of good psychology. It's been a fashionable and fun topic, with many books such as Nudge and Thinking Fast and Slow coming out that have sold millions of copies all over the world. They are filled with lots of entertaining examples of why people make such mistakes, and what nudges or fixes might be used to combat these mistakes. Most behavioural economics research has focused on uncovering these mistakes and biases with varying degrees of success. In papers published in academic journals, it's been found that the average impact of a nudge is very large, around a 9 percentage point increase of an action taken compared to the control group. When these nudges were replicated by other researchers, the average impact was only 1.4 percentage points, which is significantly lower. The list of biases we exhibit is astonishing. Humans have present bias, loss aversion, plant blindness, plan continuation bias. The list is long. One example of such a bias is the status quo bias, whereby a person might be more likely to continue doing something a certain way, even when not in their interest, just because it's what's currently happening to them. Sunstein and Thaler's example of this is when someone has a free or cheap magazine trial. Once the trial is finished, people often just let themselves continue to be charged instead of actively cancelling the subscription. We argue that educating people about this bias and allowing them to correct it should be considered. Another of the most frequently cited examples of a nudge is the etching of the image of a housefly into a men's room urinal at Amsterdam's Schiphol airport. It was intended to improve the aim. The effects were to reduce cleaning costs. This is a pretty harmless nudge. However, the nudge school has taken these small successes and expanded to more serious matters. Basically, nudges are manipulations of human behavior to follow the prescribed path determined by such unelected experts, which is where we should be concerned. Even though we have highlighted that many of these studies cannot be replicated and show lower success rates of nudges, let us now take for granted that we humans are imperfect and incapable of computing many things. The behavioural school of nudges says that a good policy is to remove information, and thus our ability to choose, to ensure that we follow a better path. But there are many other realms where our human faculties are incapable of performing at the required level, and we are still able to function in those domains. For instance, take driving a car. We have no natural sense of speed. No human could tell you the exact speed that they're driving at just by looking out of the window. So what do? We provide the driver with instrumentation that allows them to augment their abilities in order to perform as if they had superhuman capabilities. Again, to drive the point home, if you make a math mistake, we don't stop you from doing the math. We teach you how to do it better. A recent illustration of the pitfalls of the nudge approach in the UK is their response to the pandemic. The British government seemed to have been following the advice of behavioural scientists in its handling of the coronavirus crisis, opting for small nudges such as encouraging hand washing, discouraging shaking of hands with others, and self-isolating when someone had a cough, rather than the more strict measures that other countries had adopted. After Britain had an alarming increase in the rate of the infection, more strict measures were then taken. In conclusion, we highlight that the classical framework of economics does not think that people are like robots, perfectly carrying out calculations to maximize their utility from each choice they face, but rather it's a useful framework for us to act as if they do, so that we may analyze behavior and make useful observations and predictions. Behavioral economics came along and was very fashionable for a time, being adopted by governments and private companies to create small nudges, such as the urinal example, which we argue are relatively successful. However, this should not necessarily be extended to more serious and broader decision-making without careful consideration of other alternatives, such as giving people the tools to make better informed decisions. Much as in driving a car, we should be aware of the biases that people have and be appealing to these behavioral economists to now help design institutions that are sensitive to these biases and allow us to make better decisions. Thanks for listening to this video. We're Micro Insights, a team of economists and data scientists trying to make sense of the world and find little insights where we can.